Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. There's an inherent difficulty in having a season finale that might have to serve as the permanent end for the adaptation. Do you do an anime original ending? Do you potentially spoil the manga ending even while it's still printing, and even if it makes zero sense for the story up to that point? Or do you leave it on a cliffhanger even though there's no guarantee of ever getting the chance to finish it up? Romance stories, I think, have the hardest time with this, because usually the moments that best serve as finale material are also the most heavily linked to that faded word, progress. And that is asking for unsatisfied watchers if they lean heavily into it just to have the next season go back seemingly to square one. Or even worse, just cliffhanger the suggestion of a conclusion without actually following through and never giving closure. It's a perilous path, and I think part of the reason why Kaguya Wants to Be Confessed To stands out as my golden standard for romance adaptations is because of how it perfectly executes its finale for one of the most satisfying possible conclusions while still leaving the door open for a second season, one that's been confirmed even. The secret to Kaguya's success is how the final episode uses the fireworks scene, not only as the climactic moment of the episode, but how it's structured in the context of previous episodes and within its own episode, to uphold the core tenets and to ensure the audience is aware of the thematic arc of the story yet to be told. It's important to keep in mind that Kaguya is a romantic comedy, something you might actually be hard-pressed to remember in episode 11, because even though it features the Twitter scene, there's very little romance. Kaguya and Shirogane miss each other while on the school grounds, and almost half of the episode is ramen with Chika. I would go so far as to say this is the episode with the least rom and calm, ending with 9 minutes of utterly depressing ships passing in the night and then familial obligations. If you're invested in the Shirogane-Kaguya relationship, that lack of interaction in episode 11 places you in the same headspace as either of those two. You just really want to see them in the same place together again. That dip in comedic and romantic stakes of the show is exchanged for setting up and putting the fireworks meetup on a pedestal. It's important to our characters because it's their only chance to see each other. And so as we head into the final episode, it's obvious to the audience why this is a big deal, especially as we get the sad flashbacks of young Kaguya unable to go to the fireworks with friends. Getting ready, the happy music, Hayasaka's thumbs up, it's all really affirming, and so when that gets taken from her, and the audience, it's an emotional low to kick off the episode. Episode 11 had the promise of this fireworks meetup to forgive the school and shopping trip misses. Now, there's nothing. Of course, that's nothing compared to the false hope that the show gives as Kaguya is running through the streets with Shirogane trying to find her, another miss, and despite best girl's best efforts, Kaguya is unable to see the fireworks. There is a lot to gush over in this scene. The way the black serves as a barrier that she's unable to cross. It's emotionally pointless to meet up with her friends now that the fireworks are over. The dead silence besides Kaguya's depressed thoughts after the hopeful score that played as she ran, and the total isolation via shadows in the alley. But after an episode and a half of total separation, Shirogane comes to the rescue. And the rest, as they say, is history. The fireworks scene is great. It's beautifully executed, it's cathartic to have the group together again after so long, the music is intense building up to the tunnel exit, and of course Kaguya's final line is the stuff of legends. The emotional whiplash is perfectly paced. It's 10 minutes of broken promises, false hope, and more disappointment, but it only takes 2 minutes from Shirogane finding Kaguya before the first firework goes off. It is truly a phenomenal ending to a great first season. Except it's not. The fireworks scene leaves us with 10 minutes in the episode, and that is the true genius of the Geniuses' War. While the fireworks scene totally knocks the romantic aspect of the show out of the park, it is the aftermath that upholds the comedy tenet. Imagine for a moment that, indeed, the fireworks scene was the actual final moment. There's just too many questions. What's the relationship like now? Is someone going to confess with their emotions running so high? Isn't this a really serious cliffhanger in regard to what has otherwise been a pretty lighthearted rom-com? And when a second season comes around with the stakes raised so high from the conclusion of the first, wouldn't a return to the status quo almost feel like a cop-out? So instead of leaving the audience in the weight of the fireworks scene, the final 10 minutes of the show are a return to the light comedy that was so prevalent for the majority of the show. And what's a better return to form than overthinking basic stuff and completely rewriting the fireworks scene from Shirogane's perspective? Shirogane, who looked so cool to Kaguya, and the audience, as she was our focal character, has been beating himself up for, well, not looking cool. I love that this raises the question of which version is real, or if both of them are fake, Kaguya overemphasizing the cool while Shirogane overemphasizes the cringe. This triumphant moment, certainly Shirogane's win, completely unraveled in the wake of him overanalyzing his statements and actions. It's a total perspective shift, one that takes the importance of the fireworks scene to the audience and flips it on its head for one of the lead characters, and also the one that will be following for the rest of the episode. The regretful, cringe reactions are something else, and I can't help but love presented by Miyuki Shirogane as he rehashes the events. Kaguya, who is overwhelmingly self-conscious, is also unable to look him in the eye. She saw the fireworks scene the same way we did after all, which of course leads to a misunderstanding of why she won't look at Shirogane, which in turn builds into their inability to speak to one another. The allusion to a dogfight, how they're flybys, is amazing, and coolly ties into the ED actually, now that I think about it. The earlier misses, episode 11's, and the fireworks were really, truly disappointing. Here, they're just funny. After all that time of wanting to be together, now they can't even hold a conversation when they're in the same room. Fujiwara thinking they're playing a game, Ishigami as collateral damage, and being utterly confused, things are back to normal in the larger student council. But the core relationship, Shirogane-Kaguya, might not be the same anymore. That's the question we would have had if the show had ended at the fireworks scene. But after he completely misunderstands what Kaguya meant by "it's painful," it's pretty clear that things are back to normal. It's not in a way that undermines the achievement of the fireworks scene, but kind of like in a relaxing return to form after a truly satisfying moment. And we know this because of how the season actually ends. Literally the final line with Kaguya saying that she'll get Shirogane to confess to her. More of the mind games that lead to so much of the comedy before thinking to herself a line that is inherently more romantic in tone. It sets up Season 2 to jump right back in without having to handle the post-fireworks matter, but is also thematically conclusive enough that such a Season 2 wouldn't be entirely necessary, though obviously I'm very thankful we're getting one. The dogfight post-fireworks scene is the return of the status quo, but not in a way that undoes the progress that was found in the fireworks scene itself. The final episode is reaffirming of both the romantic and comedic aspects of the show, and even while it leaves the door open for a second season, it's pretty clear what the thematic arc of the show would be even without one. And that's why I love the final episode of Season 1 of Kaguya Wants to Be Confessed To. It allows itself to lean into the romantic progress of a phenomenal sequence that is affirming for the audience who shared the character's desire to be reunited because of episode 11, without suggesting it to be the end-all be-all. It also doesn't completely throw away the comedy, the backbone that so much of the show was working with that usually falls by the wayside when the big romantic moments happen. It's able to find a balance between the two, something that I think Kaguya has always been great at and promises to maintain that balance in the future. And of course, there's more to follow. Season 2 has been announced, and I'll be praying that we get a quick Season 3 so that my favorite storyline can be adapted, but even if you never got to watch another episode of the show, you would know that in the end, these two morons are going to end up together. Probably after a bunch more laughs. It's just a question of who is going to confess to who.